And there was one thing even the villagers could not ignore. Zainab never stayed past sunset. No matter how much Keto begged, no matter how late it was, she always insisted on leaving before the night swallowed the sky. It was unnatural for a girl in love. Other girls longed to spend every moment with the boys they loved. Some would even risk the wrath of their fathers just to sneak out and be with them. But not Zainab. She never risked anything. She always left. Always. Mermaid.Until watched this closely. And so did Keto. At first, he convinced himself that it was because she feared her parents. But as time passed, the excuses no longer made sense. Why did she never let him walk her all the way home? Why did she always send him back at the same spot? And why, no matter how late it was, did she never once sleep in his house? Something was wrong. For the first time in months, doubt crept into Keto's heart. One evening, as Keto sat alone under the mango tree in front of their house, the thoughts would not leave his mind. He thought of his parents, how they had loved him, how they had raised him before their untimely deaths. He thought of how Mermaid.Until had taken him in, cared for him, protected him. And now, here he was, beating the same woman who had given him life. Tears burned his eyes, but he wiped them away quickly. And then, a thought came to him. He had been with Zainab for months, yet he had never seen her home. Not once. He had walked her to the edge of the village many times, but she always stopped him at the same place, telling him to turn back. But why? Why had he never insisted on seeing where she lived? The realization hit him like cold water. He had been a fool. That night, he made a decision. The next time Zainab left, he would follow her. And he would finally learn the truth. The following evening, Zainab arrived as usual. She was as beautiful as ever, her voice as sweet, her presence as intoxicating. But Keto was different. His mind was no longer clouded by love. He watched her closely, studying her every move. And when night fell and she rose to leave, he did not argue. He simply bid her farewell, turned his back, and pretended to walk away. But as soon as she disappeared down the path, he turned and followed her. His footsteps were silent, his body hidden in the shadows. He followed her past the familiar crossroads. And then, he saw it. She did not go toward the next village. She turned and took the path that led to the river. Keto's heart pounded. Why was she going to the river at this hour? He crouched behind a tree, watching. Zainab stopped at the water's edge. For a moment, she stood still. And then, her body began to change. Keto's mouth went dry. Her legs, once slender and graceful, melted into a long, glistening tail. Her skin shimmered, her face stretched, her form twisting into something inhuman. In horror, he realized the truth. She was not a girl. She was a mermaid. And before he could stop himself, a scream tore from his throat. Zainab turned sharply. Their eyes met. And then, lightning split the sky. Keto's body convulsed as a burning force struck him, sending him crashing to the ground. Darkness swallowed him whole. And the last thing he heard was the sound of rushing water. Keto's body lay still on the damp ground, his arms twisted at odd angles, his breath shallow. His once bright, curious eyes were now frozen open, staring blankly at the sky. The air was thick with the smell of wet earth and something else, something unnatural, something foul. The villagers gathered around him in silence. Mermaid.Until, her frail body trembling, pushed through the crowd and fell to her knees beside him. Her shaking hands touched his face, but he did not move. She pressed her ear to his chest, but his heartbeat was weak, barely there. Tears welled in her old eyes. She had warned him. She had begged him. She had endured his beatings, his anger, his blindness. And now, here he was, on the brink of death. A boy who had been loved too much to be left alone. But love had not been enough. And now, it was too late. The village youth who had arrived at the scene stood frozen, their feet refusing to move closer to the river. Some had seen it, the thing that had nearly devoured Keto before their arrival. Others had only heard the screams, felt the strange presence in the air, and knew that whatever had been there was not human. The river, once a place of life, now paused with an eerie silence. The moon reflected off the surface of the dark water, but there was no ripple, no movement, nothing to show what had just happened. But they all knew. They had seen enough. And they would never forget. One of the village elders stepped forward, his voice shaking with urgency. This place must be abandoned. From today, no one is to come here again. Murmurs of agreement passed through the crowd. The river had always been sacred, a source of water, a place of rituals, a home to spirits. But now, it was cursed. And none of them would dare come near it again. For 2 days, Keto lay unconscious in his grandmother's hut. His body burned with fever, his breath shallow and weak. He tossed and turned, his lips moving, whispering things no one could understand. Sometimes he would cry out in his sleep, his face twisted in fear. Other times, silent tears rolled down his cheeks, soaking his pillow. Mermaid.Until sat by his side, her hands wrinkled with age, stroking his forehead, whispering prayers. She had not eaten. She had not slept. She only sat there, waiting, hoping, fearing. The villagers came and went, peering into the hut, shaking their heads. Some whispered that Keto was already dead, that his body was only pretending to live. Others said he was cursed, that no one could survive what he had seen. No one knew for sure. But they all agreed on one thing. If Keto woke up, he would never be the same again. On the 3rd day, as the first light of dawn crept through the tiny window of the hut, Keto's eyes fluttered open. At first, he did not move. Then, his lips parted, and a single, broken sob escaped his throat. Mermaid.Until, who had been dozing off in exhaustion, jolted awake. She leaned over him, her eyes searching his face. Keto. For a long moment, he did not respond. Then, slowly, he turned his head toward her. And that was when she saw it. His eyes, once full of life, were now empty. The boy she had raised was gone. What lay before her was only a shadow of what once was. And deep in her heart, she knew Keto would never be whole again. Days passed, but Keto did not recover. His body healed, but his mind did not. He no longer spoke, no longer ate properly, no longer moved like a man. Sometimes he sat outside, staring at the sky for hours. Sometimes he laughed to himself, whispering words no one could understand. Other times, he wept uncontrollably, his cries echoing through the village. The people feared him now. They whispered behind his back, called him cursed, avoided him when he walked past. But the worst part, the part that shattered Mama Etienne's heart, was the way he looked at her. It was not with anger, not with hatred. It was with regret. A deep, endless regret. She saw it in his eyes. He finally understood. He finally knew. But it was too late. Too late to undo the beatings. Too late to undo the words he had spoken. Too late to take back the moments when he had turned his back on the only person who truly loved him. And so, he lived in his sorrow. He walked through the village like a ghost, his mind lost between the past and the present, his soul forever tied to the mistake he could never erase. The villagers no longer fetched water from it, no longer bathed in it, no longer spoke its name. It became a place of silence, a place where nothing lived, where no one dared to go. The young men who had once fished along its shores now found other places to cast their nets. The women who had once washed their clothes by its banks now walked longer distances to other water sources. The village had turned its back on the river, just as it had turned its back on Keto. And deep beneath the still waters, in the place where the light could not reach, something washed. Something waited. And somewhere in the distance, the faint sound of laughter echoed through the night. A laughter that did not belong to the living.